So close, almost there. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into another episode of the BAMF podcast. And let me play our contractually mandated intro music. 1 second. And that's a little visual and audio experience you just listened to. Assures you you're listening to a high production values podcast. Additive free, gluten free, the finest farm to table geeky conversation you can ingest on a Friday night. Tonight we have Mr. James Kerr. How you doing, James?
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. I feel welcome.
And this is we've had you here once before to talk about the Kickstarter for your game, Fight to Survive, which we thought was really fun. It's you're trying to emulate that 1980s martial arts sort of heartfelt martial arts films, right?
Yeah, I mean the I tried to cram in probably too much into a title, but it's Fight to Survive, role-playing martial arts meets heart, and it tries to get at the attitude of the kind of love I have for objectively bad 80s American cinema, but also the bombastic fun of late 20th century action movies, but also the kind of heart and sincerity and how affecting they can be and how much fun that is. So there's layers. So it's a big onion of a book.
It's a big. We could say a parfait as well. A parfait has layers.
Everyone likes parfait.
Everyone likes parfait. All right, let me introduce our panel before we dive too far in. Jacob Blackman is our frequent co-host. He is an artist and an RPG writer in his own right. How are you doing tonight, Jacob?
Doing all right. It's a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you. And frequent panelist and making his return after 6 months or a year, Chuck Rice. Emmy-nominated Chuck Rice, who did his own martial arts RPG back in the day, Blood and Fists, right, Chuck?
That is correct, yes. And I'm proud to say that I'm allowed to be on the internet again. And so my parole officer says it's fine that I'm here. So, it's all good.
Chuck is joking, folks. I'm 98% sure. So
I was going to ask what happened to Chuck, but we're not here to talk about that today.
If the law did prohibit use of the internet, it would change the landscape of being online, I think.
Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. I'm not sure. I don't think I called it up before, but I like the name of your company. Radio James Games is pretty fun. That rolls off the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, really, it was just a shameless excuse to have all the A's line up in a radio tower.
Yeah,
and but also I spent about 15 years in radio, so
you do have that nice voice. I could see that.
It's all the microphone. I do none of it.
Nice. Well, let's talk. You had a big Kickstarter for this last year, did very well, and you have run out of your first print run for this book, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never sure how transparent to be with these things, but I'd rather just kind of one of the hats that I wear is that I'm the membership coordinator for the Indie Game Development Network, which is a non-for-profit organization that encourages indie games. And in the interest of that, I always try to have the numbers hang out there. So the Kickstarter was about 1.5 years ago. It raised, I'm Canadian, so I'm thinking in terms of Canadian funds. It raised just over 8,000 Canadian dollars. And most of that went to art, as it does.
And as an artist, I thank you on behalf of all the others.
Well, if you want art, and people do want art, you pay artists. And this is unfortunately a controversial statement at times, but you got to. I mean, I wish I could pay them more. We had a number of lovely artists. Ian McLean did the piece in front of you, and he has gone on to do stuff for Games Workshop. In fact, he got pulled off this project halfway through to go do stuff for Games Workshop, and I shook my fist at him. I was like, "Oh, I can't be mad at you. You're." But we managed to get a number of 3 other really excellent artists to come in and give very different takes on the material in order to really drive it home. The art I was probably a terrible boss when it came to the art because I gave people incredibly detailed breakdowns of what the characters were like and what they ate for breakfast and what they were thinking about on a Tuesday, and trying to reconcile all that into a page, I'm sure was just completely. I'm sure they just threw out half of it and went off. And then what they gave me, every artist. This is why you really need to employ artists. I always say, tabletop role playing game people, if you're going to publish, pay an artist, because they will 100% of the time give you back something better than you ever imagined, because they always invest their own creativity and ideas and interest into the project, and will always look better than in your head. You think it would be the other way around? It's not the other way around. It's getting an artist. So I'm appreciative. So yeah, it's
I think you just made a fan for life, and Jacob.
it funded it. We had about 362 Kickstarter backers, I think. And I've got through all of my Kickstarter stretch goals, except for one. I foolishly promised to do a solo version of the game. That's a whole other story. But everything, my whole print run is done now. It's now at Indie Press Revolution, has enough copies to last for a little while. And my local Composed Dream Games, which is a Canadian reseller, has a number of copies right now, and it's up on Drive-Thru RPG. It's bronze, but it's almost silver. Give it a week. If we'd done it in a week from now, it'd be silver. And it's up on itch.io. And if you are interested in the game and money's a concern, or I tried to use fighting analogies for these things. If you're having a fight with money and you want to win that fight, then there's community copies up there.
Oh,
so
nice.
We're at the 6-month mark since it was released to Kickstarter backers. I don't think it hasn't been public that long, but still. And here we are with it.
Nice. I made a tiny URL for your Drive-Thru RPG link, just tinyurl.com/fight2survive. People can check it out. And itch.io, I'm guessing you just go to itch.io and do a search for A Fight to Survive.
Yeah. In fact, because I don't know about you guys, and maybe Chuck, you're with me here, but I think martial arts is a severely underrated genre of tabletop role-playing games, and I'm constantly going to sites like itch.io and just typing in martial arts and seeing what comes up. And so that's part of why I put the words martial arts in the deck of the game, so that it would show up when people search for martial arts. Because Fight to Survive is a wonderful reference for the people who remember Jean-Claude Van Damme's Bloodsport and have that soundtrack going in perpetuity in their brains. But for everyone else, it can be a little obscure because it doesn't say what it is on the tin.
Yeah, I would agree. I remember, short tangent. I've had a glass of wine tonight. Warren Ellis, back when people were still paying attention to what Warren Ellis was saying, he used to complain mightily about how the superhero genre had a stranglehold on the comics medium, and there were so many different kinds of stories you could tell the comics. Why do American comics always come back to the spandex set? And I always think of tabletop RPGs where it seems like all the audience wants to glom onto fantasy, and so like many other genres, including martial arts, kind of get short shrift.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those annoying snobby people who will talk your ear off for an hour about how there's so much untapped going on in the tabletop role-playing game space. There's so much to do, both mechanically, creatively, in terms of genre emulation. A lot of what sparked this was that I just couldn't get the sensation that I wanted out of any other role-playing game. I read, I'm a fan of doing my homework, so I went back to things like Eric Wujcik's Ninjas and Super Spies and all of the other early martial arts games I could think of. And I have quite a bit of experience in martial arts. I'm not necessarily very good at it, but I have a lot of experience in it. And the problem was that the games were you either had to have a black belt in order to make sense of the mechanics, like Ninjas and Super Spies, or it was so heavily abstracted that it didn't really relate to the experience. Like playing, I'll cite it right off the bat and say, like playing a monk in Dungeons and Dragons. It just doesn't have anything to do really with martial arts. So I wanted a game that would feel like martial arts, that would celebrate its source material, and also like to flip it on a little bit on its ear is to something that felt more like fighting, because fighting is it's harsh and it's ugly and it's short and it's kind of messy and it's not very pleasant, and you have to be leading a kind of violent lifestyle to be getting into these things and trying to unpack some of that complication. And, you know, still have fun with that complication, but try and unpack some of that complication and what it means. So we needed a system. I say we, it's just a royal we, it's just me. I needed a system that would reflect that. And Fight to Survive was born inevitably out of that desire.
And contributor, or I should say commenter, Joe O was weighing in saying, I just found this gem. I was looking at older reviews. Totally jazzed for this. Thanks for your hard work.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Hey, thanks for weighing in, Joe. Chuck, I know you have a lot to say with the martial arts, so before I start trying to make more wisecracks and witty, irrelevant tangents, do you have some thoughts you'd like to share or questions for James?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the most important question, maybe the only question that matters. Not to, be grandiose about it, but how many times during the writing of this RPG did you watch the objectively magnificent cinematic classic 1989's Best of the Best, starring Eric Roberts and James Earl Jones?
Okay, I did watch Best of the Best, and I watched Best of the Best Part 2 when they go into an underground street fight, because they're both excellent. Best of the Best has some great exchanges with Eric Roberts that are emotively okay. Let me use an analogy. You know how like George Lucas, when he's doing Star Wars, he doesn't really like people to act. He just wants people to represent. I feel like there's an attitude in the genre fiction that is martial arts movies from a certain time period that people aren't acting, but they are representing really well, and they can represent emotion and they can represent passion. And Eric Roberts is really good at that. Jean-Claude Van Damme is really good at that. Like a lot of the action stars, they're muscly guys, but like they've got feeling, and maybe they can't communicate the lines, but maybe they can communicate the feeling. And I really wanted that feeling to come through. And also, if it doesn't have mechanical reinforcement, it's not in the game. So these things had to have some impact in order to be relevant. So there's a system of comforts that are the people, places, and things that are important to you as a fighter. And what drives the game forward is that those are the things that are put on a chopping block. If you have a girlfriend, your girlfriend just got kidnapped. If you have a master, your master got poisoned and you need to go and find the antidote. If you have a location that you love, it's a brick just went through the window of that place, and you're going to have to follow up on the note, and somebody's telling you to get out of town because they want to build a shopping mall or something. And if you've got a thing that you love, well, that's what's being pickpocketed by the plucky street urchin who really wants to lead a better life, but in the meantime they're indebted to some karate bastard, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So your comforts get put on the chopping block. You go on a quest effectively to save them, and violence ensues, or at least most of the time violence ensues. Sometimes people talk their way out of things,
I have a kind of a serious question this time, as opposed to the bullshit I started with. So I'm a huge fan of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, which were kind of quasi, they're not quite superheroes. Lord knows the Sons of the Tiger, they're not joining the Avengers anytime soon. Could you stretch these to that? Because they were very much, their master got killed, and there was romantic stuff going on. Do you think these rules can handle that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So there's a kind of a gradient that you can get between the gritty realism of violence and campiness. And people, and what I in the text I say that I'm using the Rocky scale. Like Rocky 1 is a sincere and heartbreaking kind of emotive story, and Rocky 5, he resolves the Cold War with a speech. and then there's a robot. So and people can kind of bounce between what Rocky in camp that they really want to capture with this. This game was I worked with another pub. I was working under Pendlehaven Press, who did Fate of the Norns for several years, and did like 6 or 7 books with them. And this game kind of sat in the background, done, like not doing much. I've been playing it on and off for about 10 years. But what really made me think that I needed to bring it out and get it out there was 2 TV shows. One was Cobra Kai, and the other one was AMC's The Warrior. Excellent martial arts shows that really understood the heart of the content and how you can make things really dramatic, and proved to me that there was like maybe somebody other than me might be interested, other than me and the friends that I forced to play this might be interested in the content. So can it do something like that? Yes, it absolutely can do something like that. But this is more on the side of grounded things. It's because I love Street Fighter 2, but it's pretty fantastic. People are throwing fireballs and people are flying into the air and whatever. And I really wanted to focus on how exciting it can be to be like, wow, that guy did a high kick. And that's still really exciting. That's exciting territory. Let's draw that out. But because I'm an absolute sucker for like 70s Shaw Brothers Kung Fu movies, there's no way that I couldn't introduce a kind of special move mechanic into the game. But the idea is that's supposed to be the later up there, you've been playing for a long time and you happen to learn this one secret technique in the structure of what's going on. Because the game is, and we haven't touched on this yet, but the game is multi-generational and takes place over a long period of time. I'm using the 20th century as kind of the playground. Like this character on screen, Moxie Wellingston, this is the 1920s. She's a flapper pugilist. So you pick a year, and each game session covers about 1 to 3 years of time. And so your character is slowly aging, and you're going to have to think about finding someone to pass on your martial lineage. Because at some point you're going to become too weak, or you're going to be too injured, or you might die suddenly because you keep putting yourself in harm's way. So you may be passing down that lineage over the course of play. I was just directly inspired by Greg Stafford's King Arthur Pendragon in trying to emulate the kind of scope that you get. Playing not just one character, but like passing that mantle.
Yeah, and as we all know, every martial arts master will eventually have to choose between Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. I mean, that's just real. That's realism. Okay,
Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes, like Larry Hama's comics, I love. And Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes.
Because you have taste. Yeah.
That's a really good example, though, because they start off as like bitter kung fu or bitter whatever it is rivals, and then Storm Shadow has a change of heart. At one point, Snake Eyes is dead. They flip flop around. They change the nature of their relationship as they go on.
In special missions, they were fighting the Vietnam War together for whatever reason. Yes. I don't know.
Well, and bringing it back to something like Cobra Kai, you've got multi-levels. Like you've got levels of different generations interacting and mixing, and it becomes as much about why are you fighting as the fact that you're fighting. And I really wanted a game that wasn't just going to be a goofy combat simulator, but was going to be which can be a goofy combat simulator, but it was going to be a lot about why are you fighting, what's going on, what are you getting into, what are the stakes, so that there's always stakes, there's always a reason.
You would have to dock me XP to stop me from saying put him in a body bag playing this game.
I mean, yeah, it has come up a few times.
What? I'm shocked to hear that.
James, do you mind if I read this sidebar?
Oh, go ahead.
Or unless you'd like to read it.
All right, I'll read it. All of the sorry, I'm going to give you too much exposition about this stuff. All right, I'll read it first, and I'll tell you what's going on. Melon Smash, 1972. The kickboxer Gober Hawkwind, 24, embraced the harsh training methods of Muay Thai, eschewing training equipment in favor of kicking trees, melons, and coconuts. This resulted in the New Hope City watermelon shortage of 1972.
The 70s were a rough time. All those long
Ran
lines
the
at
city out of
supermarkets.
watermelons.
Okay,
Yeah,
so this,
between this guy and Gallagher, there'd be no melons.
this is
left.
this is silly, right? But the point is, I didn't want to, because you are coming up with your comforts as a character, and those are the things being put on threat. The game becomes about you. It becomes about you and your group. So I wanted to make sure that the setting was exciting and vibrant, but was never going to overrule what the players were doing. So I don't have a chapter on this is the lore of New Hope City. Instead, I have pretty big blurbs attached to every picture, and every picture represents a different fighter throughout a different year. So there's 50 different fighters outlined in the book with different relationships that are called out to them, and each of them get a date and a name, so that every picture tells a story, and you can thread these multiple stories through the book. And the purpose is to show you what bright and exciting and colorful characters you can make, but also so that these, you can pluck them out if you need to, but they're not going to interfere with what you are doing in what you're trying to do running a game.
Okay, fair enough.
That was the thrust of it.
Just had a question from James O. He wants to know if Keto is represented in the book.
There is more than 50 martial arts represented in the book, and Aikido is one of them. The way it breaks down, like we can get into a little bit of the mechanics, is the moves trump other moves, and you have 5 basic moves: punch, grapple, block, kick, and footwork. And they represent a kind of rock, paper, scissors, and you choose a few of them. If I haven't mentioned it at this point because people get skittish about that. This is a diceless game. It's completely without dice, but it is meaningful. So it's not diceless and arbitrary. The decisions you make are pretty key. This is one of the martial arts lists. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not. It's broken up over a 2-page spread. So the other part of it. And Aikido is in there, but how I was very inspired by a Bruce Lee quote that was something like, unless human beings have 6 arms and 6 legs, they're going to fight like a person. I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact thing, but the point was each of these martial arts are more different from each other in terms of their teaching traditions. So mechanically, you want to go out and you want to get a teacher in this game because then they can teach you moves. And you can learn bonuses to raising your techniques in various moves. And I wanted to represent a kind of, I didn't want martial arts to be your classes, because I didn't want people feeling restricted that way. And a martial artist in their lifetime might go through, you've got it inside out. You need to have it not show up on the first page.
Right.
A martial artist in their lifetime might go through 3 or 4 serious studies of different teachers and of different martial arts. So I wanted to make sure that was not discouraged, that people could do that. What keeps you in a particular martial art is the relationships that you form with NPCs and what that comes to mean. So yeah, a lot of thought went into the structure of why you're learning and what it means. Yeah, I could go on. I'm sorry.
No, it's interesting stuff. I've been dabbling in Krav Maga a little bit lately, and the place I go, every once in a while they talk about the fact that a fight is an emotional experience for you. I mean, it's going to be scary as hell if you haven't been in a fight before. And so as part of the belt testing regimen, they used to try to simulate this. They would have, like, if you're going for your black belt, every other black belt in the building grabs a tombstone pad and tackles you. And you fight them off for a while, but eventually you wind up, underneath an old NFL pile of sweaty dudes. It's try to, give you an idea what it would be like. That was just something that often gets lost. It sounds like you're keying into it, and this is the emotional component of martial arts. So,
yeah, I mean, the game is not lethal, but the health system represents a choice. If you keep throwing yourself into every fight you get into, you're going to lose and you're going to be harmed. And sometimes it can take years to get rid of that damage, like in game, years and years. Like, oh, that elbow never set right after it got dislocated, that kind of stuff. And because I didn't want to fool around with what it means to be violent and what it means to get into violence. Because when I was a kid, like a teenager, I grew up in a small town, and there was only so much going on in a small town, and I used to get into a lot of fights, and it's not fun. It's not fun. It's not where you want to be. It's not what you want to do, and I wanted to try and structure those repercussions in a way that would make sense.
Nice. I'm happy to see Eskrima represented in there too.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to, without being too much of a martial arts nerd, I don't think Eskrima gets enough credit because I spent some time in the Philippines, and I can tell you that whoever thinks that Eskrima is not practical needs to visit the Philippines. She's holding her sticks a little bit high there, but try explaining that to an artist. No, you need 1.5 inches at the bottom of you do what you can.
Yeah, Jacob, explain that.
I was not handed the brief for this art.
Represent all artists right now.
I was not handed the brief for this art.
Okay. I
love Eskrima, and for those who don't follow Eskrima in the martial arts world, professional fighters of Eskrima are some of the most dangerous fighters you're ever going to meet. A professional Eskrima fighter has hundreds of fights every year, as opposed to, what could be considered a professional boxer who maybe has 1, 2 a year.
Right.
And
well, they do that so they don't die.
Yeah.
Eskrima people don't seem to care about that.
So, well, James, what is next in the world of Fight to Survive? Are we thinking about sequels, or?
I mean, a part of me really wants to do Fight to Survive 2 Championship Edition, and just give it 4 more pages, and then. But, well, I did a solo book that is probably not going to see the light of day for quite a while, because I put it as a Kickstarter stretch goal, thinking, oh, it'll be easy to do a 50-page conversion or something. Like, my day job is in magazines. I publish a lot. I'm used to doing a publishing cycle. And still, I just kept looking at these rules, and they're too interdependent upon having a party. And I had a really hard time structuring some solo rules. So it took me the better part of like 6 months to do it. It's done now. I have a stack of revisions right here. It's done now. It's in the playtest surveys are just about wrapping up, and I'll get it out to Kickstarter backers. And then I'll probably sit on it for a year and then think about it and maybe redo it a bit, and then it will get released to the public. So that will be the kind of next step of this as a solo game. At least this game. Yeah. I'm also running a crowdfunder in January for a completely unrelated game called Toy Box, which is about being a kid and collecting action figures.
I'm interested. That sounds like a unique situation.
Well, there's lots of games where you get to play toys like Toy Story. But so I wanted to do something which was more about the childhood experience of play in some ways, and deal with it on a few different levels. Like, if you're getting a sense here, I want to do things mechanically and in terms of the experience that you have playing them that are not possible within the current tabletop role-playing game landscape. And I try to keep very current with what that landscape is and what people are doing and what interesting people are doing, and build on good work when I see good work, and do something that's truly not unique for the sake of being unique. Like everything, this game is diceless because it did not need dice, because dice were going to harm what it meant. I'm not opposed to dice. The next game has dice. It's just making choices that are going to reinforce the content and bring its themes up to the surface and make it a better play experience for everyone.
You don't want that player who's the greatest martial artist in the world that just rolls like a 1, a 4,
Yeah.
a 6.
Well, that was one of my concerns, because I was thinking about what Eric Wujik used to say about Amber Diceless role playing, about how you have a character, they're good at something, why do you keep failing at it? So I wanted characters to feel like they could embody their character, which doesn't mean that they just win all the time or they just get it all the time. They're, especially if the rules are structured accordingly, and these rules really, like, again, if it isn't in the rules, it doesn't exist. We want to encourage the kind of play that we want to see through the structures. This is probably a rules medium game, shall we say. I don't know if you can really call it rules light. It's not a lot to know, but I do find that it's a huge adjustment for people who are coming from, let's say, a traditional role-playing background, because there are, and this is standing on the shoulders of many giants, but like there are phases that you go through and cycles within the year that you go through in order for different things to happen. And these are the special moves here.
Yeah, it almost sounds like what you're describing, that you could run a game where you start out as Ip Man and you finish as Bruce Lee.
You absolutely could.
Like that almost sounds like the rhythm of this game in a way.
It is the rhythm of this game. And I shamelessly brought in key early 20th century martial arts figures into one of the playtest games, like Sun Lu Tang, who is a master of most of the soft styles, right? Like even Sun style Tai Chi coming from him. And just a little nitpicking. I think I had Masoyama come down from the mountain like a year earlier than he actually did in Japan in order for him to tour New Hope City and like punch bulls. So it's all in good fun. In fact, this Yumi Notaru is in this picture is dressed up as the main character in Sister Street Fighter, which you can go and watch on the internet now. It's open source. There's no restrictions on Sister Street Fighter, and it's a good Japanese, the JAC, Japan Action Club.
Oh, that's the guy from the melon kicking picture. That's Hawkwind.
Yeah, it is. It is
okay.
Hawkwind, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I can easily see this RPG being adapted to a lot of different things. So, I'm as a fan of it, I'm looking at like professional wrestling. This would be great for a professional wrestling game for those who enjoy that sort of thing, especially with the story elements and personal characters and legacy and all that. I think that's an excellent thing.
What was the Hulk Hogan cartoon? The from the 80s was the.
There were several. First of all, there was a Hulk Hogan cartoon. There was a World Wrestling cartoon where you had just an amalgam cast. It didn't last very long, but
maybe I'm thinking of Chuck Norris's Karate Commandos, because like you could easily do something like that here. Now the setting within the book is restricted to a city, just for the sake of. But I mean, games leave the city. Like people go to Japan, people go to whatever. But I just wanted to try and focus a little bit on a kind of sense of isolation, I guess, and class disparity and what can happen, and make a kettle for these interesting characters to kind of bubble up.
I easily see that, because a lot of what you see especially in the old martial art movies was, industrialists or aristocrat people coming in and trying to push the workers around, and the workers only had their fists to fight with. They didn't have huge armies, so
whoa! The rich people were the bad guys.
Yeah,
when did that start?
That started in pretty much the 1800s.
It started in the 1800s. Well, one of the big motivations for this was Hard Times, which was a Charles Bronson film by Walter Hill about a drifter from during the Depression who wandered around. And Walter Hill's filmography does a lot for this. I took a lot from Streets of Fire, his 1984 film. but kind of Streets of Fire vis-a-vis, like by route of the video game Final Fight, which adapted it, and then kind of back again into the popular zeitgeist of this kind of martial arts hyper reality that we're all sharing a hallucination of.
It's like Robert E. Howard's, like one of his lesser known characters. He had a series of stories that have actually finally started to be published about the character's a sailor, but all the stories are about when he's in port, he bare knuckle boxes for money. Like you never see him on a ship at all. He's always on land, beating the hell out of some guy, betting on himself for money. That's all the stories, and they're amazing. And
it sounds like
I could see this game being that.
Yeah. No, it's fully on point.
And like sometimes he's in Cairo, sometimes he's in London, sometimes he's in Hong Kong. It doesn't matter. Like all those cities, you know how much you learn about them? Nothing. Because it's him beating the hell out of some other guy like he's Clint Eastwood in Every Which Way But Loose.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It was Clint Eastwood in Every Which Way But Loose. Minus the monkey, but you know.
Right, correct. Although he was on a ship. There was probably a monkey somewhere.
So I have to ask this here. You have a setting, you have a tone and a feel you're going for. You have characters, you have martial arts, you have all of that. Do you have adventure support for this game? Because one of the huge problems I've had in the past, especially with diceless role-playing games, is they don't have adventure support. So you don't understand how to approach the game in the way that the creators wanted this. This was a big problem I had when I was big in support of Lords of Gossamer and Shadow by Wright and Publishing, which was an amazing diceless RPG. Amazing game, great setting, but he never got around, unfortunately, Steve never got around before he passed to making adventures for it, so he never got to really show people what an adventure or series was supposed to really look like for the game he was publishing.
Yeah, the book is probably too long. It's
334 pages.
Yeah, 34 pages. And a good chunk of it, I think out of here from the end, is GMing stuff. And it's not, there we go. Thank you from the beginning. So we've got adventures. The short answer is yes. I'm sorry, I'll put the book away. The answer is yes, because we have 3 sample years that are kind of training wheels years, just to give you, and they try to make them as different as possible, just to give people a sense of what's happening. There's 2 things that happen in the game that make sure that adventure happens no matter whether you want to or not. It's a very easy game to run as a GM, because one of them is, that what's going to start things off is one of your comforts is going to be under threat. That girlfriend just got kidnapped, that bar is going to burn down, that whatever. Like, you can just throw a dart at a dartboard and be like, pick off a player comfort and be like, this is what we're going to deal with tonight.
Yeah, they lean on those.
You lean on the things that are already on the sheet. So everything that happens is relevant to the player characters. And then you just prep some enemies, and the characters interact. And over the course of, I have the fun of, I don't know how these things are going to be resolved. So Poison's bar is going under. I'm sorry, you've got a whole bunch of comfort invested in this place.
Oh, no.
If it goes under, then you're going to be sunk. But it's going under because the guy can't make his payments. So he can't afford to keep the bar. He owes 5 years back taxes, and it's just not going to work. And so the players were like, okay, well, let's do a fundraiser. Let's fundraise for this. There's a colossal failure. And then at the end of the game session, they all just had to sit and watch the bar get torn down. So it was, and they got into fights and stuff too. But the point is, I don't know. You don't have to know as a GM how these things are going to get resolved. You put something under threat. You make sure you've got some enemies, and the game propels itself forward. Part of how it propels itself forward is, I was very concerned how do things like Bloodsport or Lionheart or whatever are basically one-player games, and the player is Jean-Claude Van Damme. How do you resolve that into a group situation without making protagonism, right? Because even if you had a rotating spotlight, that might work. But what I wanted to do instead was come up with a mechanic that would encourage people to be martial comrades and not encourage them to get into absolutely every fight. So then as a GM, you're just running mass gang versus mass gang all the time, and that doesn't work. Or you're just running all the PCs versus big bad guy all the time, and that just doesn't work. Like that's fine. It can be fun, but that's the same experience all the time. So instead, it sounds counterintuitive at first, but the only advancement mechanic in the game as a PC is for you to witness someone else fighting and not fight. Because you're standing back, and this is playing into genre conventions. You know, you're standing back, you're having your drink at the bar as your buddy's getting his butt kicked over there, and you're like, yep, he's, you know. And as you know, somebody slides across the bar, and then you pick up your drink and whatever. It encourages people to really, like the player characters, to really get together, and the players really to get together and be like, okay, who's got this one? Like, okay, who's gonna deal with this? Oh, I think we better both go in. Or I think two of us better. Oh, I want to hang back because I want a training point for later. You collect these training points by not fighting, and that's how you have a training montage and increase your abilities. If you get into every fight, you're never going to train. You're never going to get any better. So you have to weigh out those possibilities. And you do have players who are like, no, I'm going to get into every fight. Okay, all right, go for it.
I think I'm looking at Cynthia Rothrock right now.
You are absolutely looking at Cynthia Rothrock, specifically from Yes, Madam.
Yeah, of course. Her and Michelle Yeoh, probably the greatest movie ever made.
Yes, I agree.
It's like between Yes, Madam and Citizen Kane. Depends on what day you catch me on.
It's true. And then you have other players who who very rarely get into fights and spend all their time training. And then when they do get into a fight, it's really impactful. It's really meaningful. And they make a big splash, and then they feel like a hero, right? So it gets people playing together. So somebody's comfort is under threat. Everyone's going to go out because that's an opportunity to either get into or witness fights. And then their comforts are going to get under threat accordingly. And the circumstance kind of piles up. The game shines its best when you play it for a long time, like when you're on your 10th or 20th or 30th session, because then you say, oh, you're the little street orphan that pickpocketed me 10 years ago down by the docks and stole my grandfather's pocket watch that was a comfort, and I had to go fight your like kung fu overlord or whatever. And then you're like, oh, hey, this was the place that we were at 5 years ago where there was a robbery and we stopped the robbers. Oh, and these circumstances continue to build, and as you meet new characters and new places, you fill them in on your sheet and you add values to them, and you are creating a sense of shared history together while you're adventuring. So it works for that. So is there support for it being diceless? Yes. Like the idea is that it traps you into playing whether you want to or not, so that the situation rolls along and it can come to a satisfying conclusion. And as a GM, I like it because I just get to make up a few bad guys that I may or may not be able to use, because you're not necessarily going to get into a fight with anybody, and then put something under threat and then just watch people mess things up.
So when they all went to the bar in Best of the Best, they were leveling. That's what you're telling me.
Some of them were, yeah. Hold on.
Sure.
Something's on fire.
This might be the first time the podcast has to be closed down because of a smoke alarm.
There are Pinkertons at the door.
Well, James is away. Let's say this is some amazing art he's got here.
I have to agree. The art in this book is just fantastic. I really like that the characters are recognizable, even from the character illustrations to the fight scenes where they show up together. Yeah, and there's a lot of fun, wholesome art if you really look through this. Just people hanging out and just chatting at the bar, driving down the street, here at the arcade. There's just some nice, just general wholesome art. which
Yeah.
reinforces the friend and familial bonds
Well, yeah,
that you're trying to encourage in this
These
game.
two kids are just trying to have fun, but the T-1000 is walking through the arcade. He's looking for John Connor.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, I have a sensitive smoke alarm that goes
That's
off
the best
if
kind.
anybody
I've heard.
has a shower or thinks the word bacon.
Oh, okay. That might be a bit too sensitive.
And of course, they are playing the legendary classic Samurai Tortoises game, which is, if anyone who grew up in the late 80s and early 90s, you played that game at the arcade.
It would be a hit if they were teenage Samurai Tortoises.
Well, I really wanted to include an arcade because I don't know about your guys' arcade experiences, but I remember them being very rough places in the 80s. Things would escalate very quickly. So I thought, well, it could be one of those rough and tumble places that is throughout the city.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. You got the carpet perfect. That is definitely 80s arcade carpet.
The world's worst carpet, yes.
Yeah, but I can remember many an afternoon whiled away on a fighting game like, well, not Samurai Tortoises, but the real world version of that, or Street Fighter, or
Double Dragon,
Russian Attack, Contra, various others.
Streets of Rage. What are we talking about here?
X-Men.
Streets of Rage was great.
Streets of Rage seems like it should be a campaign for this game. It really does. You're just having fun. Someone walks up and punches your girlfriend in the stomach and throws her over their shoulder, and the adventure begins.
James, I wish we had more time, but I'm getting texts from my wife telling me I need to go take care of bedtime. So with our son, but yeah, this is a fascinating game. I flipped through the PDF before, but I think we really shine a light on a lot of interesting aspects here. I appreciate your time talking to us about this. Any listeners who aren't seeing us live on video on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, check out the game. Go to tinyurl.com/fight-to-survive, or you can check out James's blog, where he has thoughts about lots of things in gaming at radiojamesgames.com.
If you do want to indulge me, it's just one of those for my enjoyment blogs where I post about role-playing games. Probably probably not enough, once a month or so, but it is a good central point. Thank you for having me on. I love the opportunity to talk about this game. It's one of those things that not everyone is going to get. Like, it's a weird little indie game. Not everybody's going to get it, but some people who do get it, like who grok it, really like it. And so I'd love to get it into more in front of more eyes. I forgot to mention this until now. It is an Indie Groundbreaker Award nominee. It was nominated for Best Setting. It didn't win. It lost to, I think, another martial arts game, Guat Buana, because that was medieval Filipino, and I was just boring American 20th century. But but it was wonderful to be nominated for an Indie Groundbreaker. And it's if anybody wants to reach me, there is a Radio James Games Discord as well, but you can always email me, and I welcome the distraction from my day job to talk about games.
Don't we all?
That's why we're here.
Well, Jacob, this is your day job.
Yeah.
I mean, oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, poor
He's
Chuck
so tired of drawing those damn pictures for idiots like me.
I never get tired of drawing pictures.
For idiots like me? Come on,
Exactly.
Jacob. You wanted to say it.
So I got two things to say before we log off here.
Please go ahead.
James, you're I love your Wind Raider in your background. I'm a huge Masters of the Universe fan. I just got Snake Mountain, so yay. And if you enjoy content like this, please help support the Banff Podcast Patreon.
Indeed, and we're also on Ko-fi, so you can help us indulge our various hobbies and addictions. And Joe says, "Can't wait for this bad boy. Thanks, kids. Yeah, check it out. You can find it on itch.io or DriveThruRPG. It's available right now. So please give it a look, Joe. And Chuck, Jacob, thanks for co-hosting. James, very nice to see you again.
Awesome.
And
Thank you so much, guys.
Pleasure having you. And to all our listeners and viewers, we'll catch you next time on the BAMF Podcast.